And Elise, in his Fox interview, President Trump also discussed his relationship with Vladimir Putin. Take a look.
I'm not for Russia. I'm for the United States. But as an example, if Vladimir Putin were sitting next to me at a table instead of one of the others, and we were having dinner the other night in Canada, I could say, would you do me a favor? Would you get out of Syria? Would you do me a favor? Would you get out of the Ukraine? Get out of Ukraine. You shouldn't be there. Just come on. Now, I think I'd probably have a good relationship with him. Or I'd be able to talk to him better than if you call somebody on a telephone and talk. I will tell you, as an example, if he were at that meeting, I could ask him to do things that are good for the world, that are good for our country, that are good for him. A reporter asked me, do you think you'd be better off with Russia? I said, absolutely. You know, we spend probably 25% of our time talking about Russia. And I said to myself, wouldn't it be better if they were here? And a lot of people agree with me.
Despite all that he's done to us, you think he's going to...
Yeah, but he didn't... I'm not sticking up for anybody. I'm just saying this. He didn't respect our leadership previously. He walked all over them. Look what he did to Obama with Crimea. He took Crimea. He took Ukraine. Sections of Ukraine.
Which is why he got kicked out of the G8.
No, I know, but he didn't respect our leadership. He didn't respect it. And so, but this wasn't me.
It's really hard to put into words what I just saw. And Elise, for me as a daughter of a former national security advisor who's probably one of the greatest minds on geopolitical relations around the world and strategy, I will tell you that sickens me to hear him speak that way, to be so flip, to be so pompous, to be so arrogant, to be so stupid about history, so short-sighted, and also so unbelievably confident in nothing. He has no clue what he's doing, and our prayers will rest on the people around him, but I think we better get with the program. No one can do anything under him that is effective, and I'm concerned right now for Mike Pompeo, I'm concerned for General Mattis, and I'm concerned for Republicans in Congress who have the opportunity to right this ship and are not taking it. I feel like we're on the edge of a huge crisis.
Mika, that exchange was just so utterly ignorant in the content of Donald Trump believing that he could just sit down with Vladimir Putin and say, get out of Syria, and he would do it. Get out of Crimea, and he would do it. Like, why not bring me a unicorn while you're at it? Like, that's just not how Vladimir Putin operates. It's not how he's ever operated. And if anything, Vladimir Putin feels incredibly empowered because he interfered in our election, and Donald Trump's own ego is keeping him from fully admitting it and fully looking into it and making sure that it will never happen again. So that is such a fundamental misunderstanding by Donald Trump of Vladimir Putin and his motivations that, yes, it's truly petrifying.
It's petrifying. It truly is.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
You know,
Joe.
Willie, that was, I think what we just saw there in the interview was Donald Trump's version of George W. Bush's I have looked into his soul, and I've seen him. He's a good guy. I can deal with him. Donald Trump, again, suggesting that he can deal with him. What's so interesting is about what he said on the plane. I reflected back to, gosh, it was such a long time ago, this past weekend, when Donald Trump said that actually that the Crimea invasion made a lot of sense because the people of Crimea wanted the Russians to be there, which reminded me of something that I saw last night on Twitter. Someone had quoted a page from David Halbersham's great book, The 50s, where he was talking about Joe McCarthy, and he said, there was no plan. He was shooting from the hip. It was always, I mean, McCarthy was a day trader, like Roy Cohn was a day trader. I reviewed Larry Tye's book on RFK for the Washington Post a couple of summers ago. The most revealing part was, this was during 2016, they contrasted Bobby Kennedy working in the Senate as a lawyer versus Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn never did research, The files were left unopened. He never read anything. He just went out, was a day trader, and just made allegations. And as Halberstam said in the 50s, there was no plan. There's no plan here.
Right.
This guy is a day trader. So one day, the Crimeans want Russia to invade. The next day, hey, I could get them out of Crimea. Tomorrow, it'll be something else, which, of course, this very nature of Donald Trump, this reckless, undisciplined nature of Donald Trump, is what's so dangerous on the foreign policy stage.
Yeah, I think if you're going to have the bumper sticker quote about Donald Trump, it also came last week when he said, I don't have to prepare, it's about attitude, when talking about the North Korea summit. And that, as you say, is sort of the Roy Cohn view of the world, which is the power of personality will win out. He doesn't believe in preparation, he doesn't believe in history, he doesn't believe in context. He believes his singular personality can get things done, that if he gets in the room with somebody, like on The Apprentice or like he's doing a building deal in New York City, he can convince them to come to his side. And Joe, as you know, it's working. I know we'll get into this, and we're going to have Mark Sanford on the show in just a few minutes, but you had that chairwoman of the Republican Party tweeting yesterday this: anyone that does not embrace the Donald Trump agenda of making America great again will be making a mistake. That's where the Republican Party is. It's a power of personality. It's not about ideas. It's not about even conservative policy anymore. Ask Mark Sanford of the Freedom Caucus with a 100% ACU rating. It's about your loyalty to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump knows that, and that's why he knows he can go on camera and say the things he's saying without penalty.
He does. And before we go to break, Mike Barnacle wants to share a picture.
Joe, I don't know whether you've seen the front of the Times this morning. Could we get
You need to look at this right there.
A close-up of this? This is a 2-year-old Honduran girl at the border, the United States-Mexican border, crying as her mother is being frisked by an ICE agent. And we have in this country right now thousands of children who have been orphaned by the actions of the United States government. And so we've talked a lot about the country today, what it is and what it means, what it has meant to the world.
We are.
And we should ask ourselves, is this the United States that you remember? Is this the United States that you want to be? Is this the United States you want the world to see?
And let me add to that I've talked to a lot of conservatives, and I've read what a lot of conservatives have said about our current policy. Conservatives who, like myself, want a very tight border and are very tight. Are very conservative when it comes to immigration. We believe that borders mean something. We believe that the first thing someone does when they come into our country should not be violating United States laws. I'm a hardliner on immigration. At the same time, what's going on right now at the border is un-American. And I will tell you, a lot of Catholics, leaders have come out and said, it is un-Christ-like. Yesterday, reports coming out that a woman was breastfeeding her daughter, and in the middle of it, her baby was ripped away from her. Public defenders in the federal courts down there in McAllen, Texas, reporting that children are being told, and their parents are being told, that they're being taken off to the showers and that they'll return. And they never return. You know, I don't have to compare that to previous regimes in other horrific countries. That conclusion actually is too obvious. This is Donald Trump's America, and yes, it sounds like something we would be condemning coming out of North Korea. And if this is, as Mitch McConnell says, what he considers to be the high water mark of conservatism in America, then Mitch McConnell is a fool. Mitch McConnell is an ignorant fool who knows absolutely nothing about conservatism, about Edmund Burke, about Russell Kirk, about Milton Friedman, about William F. Buckley, and yes, about the sainted Ronald Wilson Reagan, who Mitch McConnell says was not as conservative as Donald J. Trump, lifetime Democrat and contributor to the DNC, Nancy Pelosi, Rahm Emanuel, and Chuck Schumer. That's our America, Mika. And sadly, that's our Republican Party. And that is the problem today.
It's a big one.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.